Here we go. This is my language tag. I got the questions right here, so let's move right into them. First, what do you consider to be your native language? I was raised in Germany. Both my mom and my dad are monolingual Germans, and I was raised monolingually German, so I would consider German to be my native language. Nothing much exciting going on there, but there you go. 2. What was your first language learning experience? When I was 5, my mom and we went to a vacation to Greece, and I remember that I wasn't able to communicate with anyone because weirdly enough, nobody understood me. Now in hindsight, I understand obviously that was because they didn't understand my German, and I didn't understand whether they were talking Greek or English, I don't know, but it was something I didn't understand. My real first language learning experience is when I was 9 and I had English classes for the first time. And I have a whole video about how I learned English, so if you want to watch that, check that out. But we didn't really learn anything other than like a few words and phrases. But I remember being fascinated with that feeling of, wow, I can use these random sounds that to me obviously sounded totally random, and other people understand them. Like, these things mean things to other people. And then I proceeded to have 2 pretty bad years, 3, maybe 4 pretty bad years of English education where I was so overwhelmed with like the way English was structured and the classes, and I didn't understand my teacher, and I cried in class over English more than once. So that were the first few years of my English learning experience. There you go. 3. What languages have you studied and why did you start them? Good question. I should have prepared something, but I didn't, so I'll try to remember all of them off the top of my head. As I just said, I learned English from grade 4 all the way until now because I had to, I didn't have a choice. I started to learn Latin from grade 6, I believe, for 5 years. Don't quote me on that. Maybe it was just 4 years. Because I had to choose either Latin or French, and at the time I thought Latin was a good idea, so I went with that. Probably also because I had such a bad time with English already, and I didn't want to learn another language like French where the teacher had this like little puppet thing, and it scared me so much. Like, it came at me in class and it would talk to me in French when they had the introduction to French or something. I don't know what the class was called. But I remember being really scared, and then I'm like, yeah, I'm not dealing with that. We're taking Latin. Funnily enough, 2 or 3 years later in grade 8, we were yet again given the choice between a few classes. There were some chemistry and biology classes. We also had computer science and art, and I don't remember all of them, but French was one of them, and for whatever reason, I chose to learn French, which I then proceeded to learn for 5 years until I graduated high school, and I have not touched it since. The next language then would be Japanese, which I started as my major in university. So right after I graduated high school, I started uni and I started a major in Japanese. The reason why I got interested in Japanese initially was because my mom had like textbooks of Japanese just laying around at home, and I saw the kanji and the hiragana, and I was like, I want to learn how to read that. That looks so cool. And then I also didn't know what to do after high school, so I figured, I might as well just get a whole degree in a language I don't know. And that's what I did, and here we are, 5 years later. The next language that I would say I studied seriously was Dutch, and it started out as a challenge. What was that name again? I think it was called the Lang Jam Challenge or something, where you're assigned a language and you learn it for 1 weekend. I was assigned Dutch in the midst of the pandemic in 2022. I did that for about a month, dropped it, and then about half a year later, when I was back in Germany after my exchange year in Japan, I still needed language classes that were not Japanese or English to basically finish my degree, so I decided that, Dutch was kind of easy and I might as well go for it. And so I went with that for almost a whole year. After that, the last language I would say I seriously studied was Spanish, which I took, I think, half a year after I started my Dutch class because I was still missing credit points to graduate. And I didn't feel like learning something completely new, but I also didn't want to go back to French or Latin or something. So I figured Spanish might be somewhat interesting. It gave me enough credit points, and there we go. Oh, I totally forgot Korean. Obviously, I started to learn Korean at the beginning of 2022, something that I had been wanting to learn forever just because I think the writing is so cute. And that is actually the first language that I'm not learning in a school/university context, but that I'm learning by myself. I have also dabbled in Mandarin, which I gave up pretty quickly because I couldn't be bothered to learn yet another type of grammar, more characters, weird pronunciation. I also dabbled in Tagalog for, I don't remember the reason, but I think it's pretty cool how you can just like throw English words in there and it's like perfectly fine. It's a sign that you're educated, so that makes it pretty easy to learn. If you know, you don't have to learn every single word, you can just kind of throw some English in there. I have learned the teeny tiniest bit of Turkish a couple years ago, and I also dabbled is too much. I learned like a few phrases and the numbers in Cantonese, which we'll get back to later. But I believe that that is all I have, which is already too much, but anyways. 4. How does your personality affect how you learn languages? I would say that for the longest time, and for some languages still actually, I was very shy to talk to people because I felt like I didn't really know what I could say, what I was capable of, and that held me back from speaking. It was only in Japan that I really learned that if I keep pushing back speaking, and I always keep this thought that if I don't know how to say things perfectly, then I won't talk, that is essentially a goal I will never reach, because there's always going to be things that I don't know how to express perfectly. And having lived in Japan, it just really showed me that, you can have a great time even if you don't exactly know how to say things, and you'll find ways to communicate your needs, communicate your wishes, communicate whatever you need to say. 5. Do you prefer learning languages in a class or individually? Personally, I like a combination of both. And I know I might get a lot of backlash for this, but I do think that classes have a right to exist. I always like to think of classes as something that gives you a direction, gives you a next step, a next thing to learn when you don't really know what to learn. Because let's face it, learning things by yourself can be really hard. You don't have anyone to hold you accountable. You don't have anyone to keep you disciplined. You don't have any direction. You could go literally anywhere. On any given day, you could learn grammar, you could learn vocab, you could practice your listening, you could practice your speaking. What do you do? And so I think classes are really good to hold you accountable, as well as give you a kind of direction, at least some kind of guideline to what to learn next. And then once you know what to do, you can base your individual learning in your free time around that topic or that grammar or whatever it is that you have to learn. 6. What are your favorite language learning materials? Link? I would say link. But aside from that, I would say that Migaku is pretty good especially for Japanese. You want to do your Japanese reading on Migaku. For Chinese, it's amazing, the best thing you can do, honestly, especially Cantonese. If you want to read Cantonese, learn Cantonese, Migaku is your way to go. But since I don't learn any of those languages, for me right now, just using link. 7. How much time do you spend actively learning per day/week? Well, as I said in one of my recent videos, I kind of took a step back from learning languages, and right now all I'm doing is my reading for the BBIM challenge. I get about 20 to 30 minutes of reading in daily, and then about twice a week, whenever I finish working through one transcript, I will also listen to it and read the subtitles again, look up the words again, and take a few notes. So I would say I study Korean for about 4 to 5 hours a week, maybe. 8. What are your short-term and long-term language learning goals? The first thing that I'm wondering is what is short term and long term? Like to me, 1 year would be a pretty short term goal in the grand scheme of things. And then long term would probably be like 5 years. So I'll just go with that. My short term language learning goals, as in my 1 year goals, I will upload a video on that later this week or next week, as I always do, for my 2023 goals. So definitely stay tuned for that. For my long-term language learning goals, right? Let's say in like 5 years, I want to confidently be able to say that I speak the languages that I'm currently learning / kind of know / can read, or whatever is going on with them. I want to actually be at a point where I can speak them. And I know that that is very vague as well, but let's take my Japanese for example. I don't have a problem with it. I can communicate, I can live in Japan. Could I work there? Depending on the job, potentially. Can I read very specialized texts about something that I don't even know about? No, but I can't do that in English either. So speaking to me means a level where I can form meaningful relationships with the people around me without putting too much strain on them or on me or on the relationship. So in 5 years, I want to be able to speak German, English, Japanese, as I already do. And then I want to get my Dutch level to a point where I can actually say I speak it. Because right now I'm really good at reading, I just don't really know how to speak because I never practiced it. I also want to be able to say the same thing about Spanish, Korean, and potentially one other language, but I'm gonna have to see just how things go because learning does take a long time. 9. What is your favorite language? That's so hard. I like different things about different languages. But if I had to choose one, it would probably be Japanese. Even though I also hate Japanese, I also love it. It's very weird, but I just like the way it looks written, like with the kanji, right, and the hiragana. They just look good together. They just belong together. The way the syntax works, I love Japanese syntax. English syntax, I don't care. German syntax, I don't even know how it works. Japanese syntax, I love talking about it. Yeah, it's just really cool. The way the language works, the way it's like built, the way sentences are constructed, love it. 10. What is the next language you want to learn? The next language I will probably start learning, and I don't know how serious I'll take it, but I'll give it a try, is Cantonese. The reason being that over the last 2 years, my boyfriend helped create a lot of resources for Cantonese learners. They have a really, really good 1K deck. They have a grammar guide. Their written language is now somewhat standardized, and they are working on a really good dictionary. Migaku's parsing for Cantonese is apparently the best there is. And they have so many movies and shows and TV series and anime, a whole library of content. Everything is really well compiled now. It's really easy to find. That Cantonese is no longer a language that has no resources. I think all of these resources will make the learning process, especially the beginning stages where you don't really know what to do, pretty easy compared to quite a lot of other languages actually. And again, I just really like how it looks. Traditional Chinese characters are so much cooler than simplified characters, and since Cantonese, I believe, uses mostly, if not completely, traditional characters, though I think it can be written and simplified. But why would you do that? Anyways, so I think it looks really cool. That's what I wanted to say. 11. What advice can you give to new language learners? That is a good question. I might have to think about that one a bit more. But I always like to say that there are no perfect methods for learning a language, right? Whether you take a class, you go to the country, you use textbook A or textbook B, at the end of the day, it doesn't make that much of a difference as people think it does. What I'm trying to say is that you can only maximize language learning efficiency up to a certain point. If you know that something works for you and you're having fun doing it, and you can tell that, a month later, you're not at the same point anymore that you were a month ago, then just keep doing that. That's all there is to it. Don't be afraid to listen to suggestions of what you could improve or what you could change. Don't be afraid to experiment a little bit, but if something works for you and you're having fun, just keep doing it. It's literally fine. It's not a race. You don't have to be the best whatever language you're learning speaker that there is. You don't have to be the fastest to learn it. And language learning shouldn't put pressure on you. It shouldn't stress you out. And that's all the questions there are in this language tag. I hope you got a better idea of who I am as a person and what I think about language learning and all of that. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and stay tuned for the 2023 language learning goals. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.